Hi guys. Okay, so this week was about internet safety. And so the first question is, why is it important? And I think it's important because it keeps us safe. While the internet is a valuable tool, it is also a big problem because we face the issue of a lot of our personal information getting out there. And let's face it, a lot of us are like, oh, it's so much easier to do it online because then I don't have to go and stand in a line. And for whatever reason, probably because there's nobody else around us, we feel like our information is more safe. Like, how many of us go somewhere and whisper our personal information to whoever is asking us because we're afraid other people will hear? But in reality, but when we go to like the internet, um, we're more like, we can say it out loud, we can type it and send it to whoever, wherever, whatever it is, and we don't care. That's a huge problem. Just because we don't have people around us doesn't mean it's not an issue. Because things are getting hacked all the time. Our personal information is vulnerable, and we have to learn to teach that to our students. So, as future educators, is our responsibility to tell students, don't put your personal information out there. It's not okay. And that anything and everything you put on the internet is no longer private. You can't take it back. No matter how many times you delete it, it's still there. You can still find it. So while the internet is awesome and you can access all this information, once it's out there forever. So I guess how you teach it, well, I really like the whole NetSmart thing, but I would say, make sure that you kind of rehearse it with your students, give them examples, and walk them through, okay, if I would tell this to somebody, is that safe? Um, Kind of thing. Walk them through different scenarios and get them to make it a classroom discussion. Let's talk about why this is not safe. Let's talk about why, what could we have done differently, and stuff like that. So after exploring NetSmart and doing that, while to me actually doing it was incredibly boring, I see the point, and I think because they've kind of morphed the lessons to be more kid friendly based upon their age, I think that is so much better. Because I think teenagers would just be terribly bored if they had to deal with a robot. Like, that's boring to kids. Give them teenagers, give them something that they can relate to. Um, and then for, definitely your older kids, give them something that's happened to somebody. Make it real. So I like I like that. I do feel like it is relevant because it kind of grows and morphs based upon the kids' age. And it's free training for teachers and educators, parents, whatever, because people feel like they need it, and we do. Um, Especially since in the article, for instance, it talks about generational gaps, and there are gaps. And so even our generation needs to be aware that the younger generation that we are teaching, and then we'll teach other generations after that, like, it's not okay that it's going to be an issue. It's going to be changing, and we need to change with it. Okay, so the main points of the article. There's child and youth internet safety, which talked about cyberbullying, sexual solicitation or unwanted sexual content or whatever. There was role on privacy, parent community involvement, and then gaps between the generations. Um, and then another thing was recommendations, which basically went over what needs to be studied, and they actually had a lot of studies on there that needed to be, the writers felt like it needed to be done to get a more comprehensive view on technology in our world and internet safety in general. So now what I found interesting was, for instance, cyberbullying. They had a study that they quoted or referenced, and it said that the guy went and surveyed all these schools and everything and found that ones with clearly defined policies on cyberbullying and clearly defined like consequences and stuff had better, and the student population being involved had better or lower, I'll say lower, of cyberbullying, reported cyberbullying, while schools with zero tolerance policies still had like cyberbullying and had a lot of it, which I found interesting because a lot of us will work in schools with zero tolerance policies. Zero tolerance became a thing that we thought would work, and then technology and internet and stuff like that became a lot more prominent in our society. And so I think that that is where our issue lies. Is that we need to rework our policies. Some of them don't work anymore, and we need to get over that and just change. And something I found interesting is that for the parent community involvement portion of the child and youth internet safety, they talked about where parents get their information. A lot of it, a third of it, give or take, is from media. Another third is from other parents, and then the last third is from schools. So it's actually broken up pretty evenly. And so I think that as future educators, we have the potential to actually do all three. So, I mean, get on your Facebook or, email parents about, hey, your child's going to be on the internet. Here's some safety stuff for you. Or go on Facebook and post safety stuff. Also have pamphlets in your school ready to hand out to parents who just come into the office or they want to talk to you. So let's do it on conference. Have that as part of their packet of stuff that you're going to give them from conferences. And then if you are a parent, some of these students that you work with, you'll be friends with their parents. So there you go. You've got that, and you've just, for one person or whatever, you've covered like 100% of all your bases, and they have information, but you need to be up to date on your information first. So I think that needs to be very much highlighted, that you need to be up to date on your information. As far as the studies go, I think it's really interesting that they don't have more of a clear, like the first study talks about like demographics, and I found that interesting that they don't have a lot more demographics. And I would definitely say that needs to be studied, like, who is really being affected, who's not being safe on the internet. So I think that really needs to be reviewed. But overall, I actually really, while some of this part of this week was boring to me, I actually think it's definitely a necessity because as a teenager, or when I was a teenager, so as, when I remember me as a teenager, like, I get it. We're not always safe. Even as an adult, I'm not always safe, and I need to be. My information is valuable. So, alright guys, I'll see you next week.